Hello students, here's Professor Plinio Monteiro, and in this lecture I will explain to you how you can estimate the demand and the potential in international markets. And our objectives with this lecture are discuss on the relevance of market definition for estimating market potential at country level, and also to explain the concept of product life cycle and how this concept and how this factor will affect the market demand and the potential evolution over the time. Let's start with one example. For personal computer by 2010, it was estimated that the market potential is something like 450 million units of computers per year. And the market demand is basically something hopefully very close to 310 million units per year. So basically, what this means that the current sales of personal computers by 2010, it's something very close to 310 million units, while people and specialists believe that in the future, the number of units sold of personal computers is something close to 450 million units. And when you look to the sales of a given company like Dell's, basically their sales is a percentage of this current demand. So when we look to these three figures, we know that demand of personal computers are right now not achieving the full potential. So this means that you still have some potential for increasing the sales over the time, and that this market, over some period of time of evolution, will probably reach the potential in the future. And this shows what are the level of opportunities that you have for Dells. And a key factor to understand what will be the definition of your demand and your potential is definition of how narrow or broad it's conceived your market. And this phrase from Jack Welch explains a little bit that if you just look to a narrow definition of market, usually you're going to have a small potential for your market. For instance, if you look to a given market, thinking about just for some specific customers, and if you're just thinking about a specific product to serve these markets, usually the potential will be smaller. But if you look to a broad definition where you think about new products that can be developed and new potential customers that you can serve in the future, usually the market potential will be greater. So you will have a huge market potential. And a key aspect to define and to estimate your market potential and demand is to define how broad or narrow will be your definition. With that in mind, you'll be able to estimate the demand. But what exactly is this task? This is what I'm going to ask with this explanation on market potential and market demand. And also I will give you some general equations that will help you in estimating the demand. Let's start with one example. This is what we call a product market structure. And we can see in the vertical axis the market demand and the demand of non-alcoholic beverage market over the years. So by the beginning of 1940s, basically we have the market of non-alcoholic beverage divided in four main categories. And soft drinks, coffee and tea, milk, and these other products, Kool-Aid, basically they represent the same shares of this market structure. Over the years, by the 60s, Basically, the percentage of this market that belongs to soft drinks increased while the other markets basically keep the same size. And by the 80s, we still faced this increase in soft drinks, but as you can see, many other products entered in the structure of this market. And this is a process that came with competition. So new competitors enter into the market, or existing firms try to develop new products to keep their market share or to expand their products to new markets. And doing that, basically new products will rise. And this means that we have a different market structure. And by the beginning of the 2000, the year of 2000, we can see that the soft drink still have a huge presence in the market, but now we have many different competitors. For instance, sports drinks and energy drinks. And this is what usually happens in a given market. During the evolution of the market, in the beginning, you have few products and few competitors. Over the years, some competitors will become leader or have a greater presence in the market. And this will attract new competitors. And these competitors will enter with new value propositions, with new products. And usually, also the existing and leaders in the markets will develop new products to try to block and try to protect their market shares. And this means that over the years, not only the demand will increase given new products delivered to new consumers, but also new competitors will enter into the market. And usually this happens when each of product categories reach what we call their tipping point. So basically, when they reach the point where the sales stop increasing. And at this moment of time, usually new products will be delivered by competitors or by the existing companies. And one thing that happens during this process is that the leaders, usually large-scale enterprise and multinational companies, will try to focus in narrow definition of the markets. And usually when they do so, they're going to lose some opportunities to enter in new markets, and this led new competitors to enter into the market with new value propositions. But let's look to what is the narrow and broad definition of market and what are the implications of this definition for estimating the demand and the potential. Let's look to the definitions of a broad and narrow market in an example of soft drinks and energy drinks. Look at the definition of Coca-Cola with focus in the product soft drinks. And if you think about soft drinks just in the United States, the market demand by 2009 will be something close to $30 billion. And Coca-Cola achieved more than 50% of this market share. But if you think about soft drinks worldwide, then the demand will be something like $128 billion, and then the market share of Coca-Cola will be wholly 22%. But if you make a more broad definition, like non-alcoholic beverage, then the demand worldwide it's close to $720 billion, and the market share of Coca-Cola is just 4.2% of the market. As you can see, the first definition, a soft drink in the United States, it's a very narrow definition. And if you have a definition like that, basically you can believe, you look to the numbers, and it seems that Coca-Cola is achieving, it's like the leader in this market. But when you move to a more broad definition, including more products and more geographic areas, basically now you see that their market share are not that high like compared to the first one. And um, when you have this broad definition, uh, it's good to see what's the size of the entire market and how you're competing with very different value propositions and with very different um, uh, type of customers. And when you do so, when you look to a very broad definition, you're looking for new opportunities. So open your eyes to a broad definition of market will help you in looking for new opportunities. In the other side, let's look to the definition of Red Bull by the same time. So if you think about energy drinks in Europe, Red Bull was achieving something basically 50% of the market. Worldwide, their market share was just 41.7%. And in the non-alcoholic beverage, basically they have 0.7% of the market. So when you have a narrow definition, it's sometimes you become blind to the entire market. But if it's not always a disadvantage to do that, because when you have a narrow definition of the market, and if you have a niche market, you can become, for instance, a leader recognized with your brand in that market. So sometimes if you have this focus like Red Bull focusing just in energy drinks, when you have this focus, it's not always a limitation. Sometimes it can help you in maintaining your focus and maintaining your leadership and understanding that you're operating in a niche market. But as you can notice, it's very different, the background for Coca-Cola, a big company trying to operate in many different markets, from the definition of Red Bull, now that they try to focus just in the energy drinks. And in that case, depending on your product and in your value proposition, your strategy, it's not one limitation to adopt a narrow definition of the market. But you need to be careful when you do so, especially if you're thinking about big companies and large-scale enterprises. With that in mind, let's take a clear definition of the market potential. So this is the maximum number of units that can be consumed by the world population or other defined market at any point of time. So the idea of market potential is basically what is the expectancy of the demand in terms of volume sold or in terms of revenues in a given market, in thinking about the best scenario that can happen. So basically the potential is the maximum that you can reach in terms of units or sometimes in terms of revenues. And usually when the market evolves, the demand is starting in the beginning of the markets. Usually the demand is so small. And over the time, this demand will increase, starting a very slow increase, and after some period of time, this increase will be, the market will grow very fast, and after that, the growth rate usually stabilize, and after some period of time, you start declining the growth rate until you reach a maximum. That is basically when you are reaching the market potential. And once the market evolve and the number of new customers that can start to consume or to buy these products, when this number of new customers basically disappear, this market is becoming saturated. And in that case, a market will be saturated when the number of units and the average consumption, in financial terms, will be very close to the maximum. And in that case, it will be very hard for you to find new customers and increase sales. And a saturated market will usually show to companies that they need to look for new opportunities and to invest in different markets to keep growing. And in the beginning, you have the saturation of the market will be very small, and over the time, the saturation will be very high. And also have this high level saturation like The most of people in the target market are right now consuming the product and consuming a lot of that product. Basically, at that period of time, your market became saturated, and that's the time for looking for new opportunities in new markets. Let's look to this example. So this is the evolution of the market demand of personal computers over the time in terms of million of units. As you can see in the beginning, the volume sold was small, and during some period of time, especially between 90s and 2009, 2008, the volume sold of these products increased very fast. And as you can see, just by the end of 2009 and 2010, the increase of the volume you can see that a reduction increase. So basically, you have a very fast and very strong growth over the 90s and 2008. But after that, basically, the demand starts decreasing, the growth starts decreasing. And what will be the potential? It's basically what is the maximum that this market this market can reach, and when this number will be reached. And when you have one understanding of this maximum and understanding of when will happen this maximum, then you have a very important information to help you in planning the long-term investments in your business. So if you have a expectancy of a huge increase in the future, you probably are going to invest a lot of money in that market. But if you don't have this expectancy of this huge market in the future, probably it makes no sense for you to invest a lot of money, since the market will not pay off your investments. And because of that, market potential, it's a clear and very important definition to guide you in your long-term strategies. The demand are important for the short-term tactics and strategies, but for the long run, the investments in the long run, you are always looking for the potential of that market. In general, we can say that the market potential can be estimated by the usage of this equation. You just need two numbers, the number of customers and the average consumption. This is the same equation to estimate the current demand. What will make a difference? Basically, how you are going to estimate these two variables. For instance, when you are trying to estimate the market potential, the number of customers, you usually think about the potential number of customers. So probably you're not think about the number of current customers in this market. Let's think about the ride-hailing app market in Brazil. Suppose that we have something holding to 40 million people using applications like Uber and Cabify. And suppose that you have these 40 millions, and in average they will spend something like 200 reais. So if right now you have 40 million people using the apps, and in the average they have expenses like 200 reais, then you have 40 million multiplied by 200. This will be the current demand. But what will be the estimation of market potential? Suppose that you believe that in the future, in 10 years from now, you expect to have 80 million people using ride-hailing apps in Brazil. And also you expect the average consumption to increase and then to reach like 400 reais per user. This means that the market demand right now it's something very small, given that you have 40 million spending 200 reais each. And in the future, you expect to have twice the number of customers and also twice the average expense. Oh, and think about it, basically the potential will be 4 times the demand, meaning that the demand right now is basically 25% of the potential in this market. So this general equation will basically give you a clue that can be used to estimate the current demand and also to estimate the potential. So the difference is what you're going to use as the numbers for customers and the average consumption. But this equation, the big challenge here is to estimate the average consumption. We have many strategies for doing that, but sometimes it's better to make a division of this average consumption in different factors that will determine what will be this consumption in a given market. The next slide, I'm going to show you this example. And how can you estimate the market potential? Basically, the idea to estimate the potential is to have some numbers of the number of customers that you have, and then multiply that by the average consumption of people that belong to that market. So the first step is to define your boundaries in terms of geography, the bounds of that market. For instance, your market can be defined as a country, and in the case of international market, usually we start with that point. So basically you have the size of population or the size of a specific group in that population. And this will be the number of the maximum consuming units. Of course, these maximum consuming units can be defined as small groups, for instance, like cities, or even as a small area inside a city. In that case, you're just making a more narrow definition of your market. And this equation that I'm going to show you, it's one example on how you can use this general procedure for estimating the potential, and using that to estimate the potential based on various numbers. And this equation is based on a book of Roger Best, The Market-Based Management, and you also have an online app that you can use for estimating your demand with this procedure. So we also define the geographic scope of our market. Then you have the number of units, the number of consuming units. So here I think about people, how many people or business you have in that market. And you need to multiply this number of customers by the buying ceiling. What is buying ceiling? It's basically the maximum percentage of people that can buy that product in a given scenario. This could be something related to how, if people have money to buy that product, but also can be related to other factors that can affect if people are going to use or not that product. For instance, if you have just a product for female, of course, in the beginning, you're going to put the maximum consuming units thinking just about women, thinking that the product will be consumed just by women, of course. And the buying ceiling can be what will be the percentage of women that will be willing to buy that, or that will have the money and the conditions to buy that product. And of course, this number cannot be greater than 100%. And usually this number can be very lower than that. And of course, the buying ceiling depends on the consumer behavior, but especially depends on your strategy, especially by the price that you're expecting to have to that product. So if you think that the product will be very costly, the buying ceiling will be smaller. But if you think that your product will be a very cheap product, a low-cost product, probably more people will have money to buy it, and this will increase the buying ceiling. After that, you need to multiply the purchase rate. So basically, it's the number of times that people will buy the product in a given period of time. Sometimes you have a purchase rate that is smaller than 1. For instance, if people buy the product 2 times, 1 time at each 4 years, so it means that they were going to buy the product in average in 1 divided by 4 will be 25%. So basically the purchase rate could be a number like 25% or 10%, or this can be a number greater than 1. For instance, the purchase rate when you go to the supermarket could be, let me say, 12 times a year. So let's say that this is the average purchase rate. And what is the purchase quantity? Each time that you make that you buy something, what is the volume that you buy in each time that you go, for instance, to the supermarket? So suppose that you are making the estimation for beer, and you know that you have the entire population of a country, like Brazil, like let me say very close to 220 million people, and by saving could be something like 70%. So we believe that in the future, 70% of the population will buy beer, and we're thinking about sales in the retailers. So thinking about sales in the retailers, we can think that people go to buy beer in a supermarket 12 times a year, one time a month per month, and we have the purchase quantity. Let's say that people buy in average 6 cans of beer, or let me say something like 2 liters of beer. And the average price, it's basically the average price that people are buying in that market. Let's say that they're paying in average like 2 reais. So if you multiply all these numbers, the maximum consuming units by the buy ceiling, by the purchase rate, by the purchase quantity, by the average price, then you're going to have your market potential. And all these numbers, the buy ceiling, purchase quantity, purchase rate, and average price, all of them depends on the strategy, on the scenario that you're building for that product. So you can use this equation to estimate the potential and use this number as a clue to understand which markets are more interesting for you to invest your money. Let's give one example with the market potential for personal computers. Let's start with the maximum number of consumer units, and suppose that we believe that 4.5 million customers they are the target group. And in that case, I think about the profile of people that usually buy personal computers. We need to restrict that by the age groups, and also for thinking about professional categories. So thinking about the entire world, we believe that 4.5 million is the maximum number of consuming units. Also, for instance, we need to reduce from this number people that do not have people without access to electricity and probably internet. And with these definitions, we can reach the maximum number of customers. After that, we have the buying ceiling. So we believe that from this entire population, we believe that 50% will have conditions to buy the product, given the scenario that we are delivering in terms of average size, average price, and also the availability of these products in the shelves in the retailers. And also, we have the repurchase rate per period. So suppose that we believe that each people will buy a computer in each 5 years. So if people buy a new computer in each 5 years, so the average repurchase rate will be 1 divided by 5, that will be 20%. And in general, the average quantity bought in each time that people buy a computer is just 1. So we have a purchase quantity of 1. And the average selling price is $650. And this is the average price that we believe that will be achieved in this scenario of market. And when you multiply everything, so multiplied 4.5 billion by 50%, by 20%, by 1, and by $650, then we have the potential for this market that will be $292.5 billion per year. And of course, this estimation depends on many assumptions, and sometimes you need some data to have some idea of these values, but in general, it depends on assumptions. So you're going to make us a scenario thinking about what will be the future price, and what will be the average consumption. And everything in this equation can be changed according to your strategic assumptions and what you believe that will happen with the market environment for this product in the future. When estimating the potential and the demand, usually we have some challenge to overcome to have better estimates to guide us in our strategy. In general, large-scale enterprise and multinational companies usually will have access to current demands and forecasts. So they go to companies like Nielsen, or they develop their own methods for estimating the demand, and they can use very and highly skilled statistics and also strategies that will create very good estimates of the current demand and make some short-term forecasts. Even though they don't have, there is no number about market potential. So market potential, it's really impossible to find. It's basically one assumption. You need to make a lot of assumptions about these equations, these variables in the equation, and these will lead you to one estimate of potential that depends entirely from your assumptions. And the main factor to have a good estimate of potential, and remember, potential is much more important than demand, because the demand will help you in the short term, but in the long term, what really matters is the potential. And to reach this good estimate of potential, you need to think about facts, logic, and assumptions. So it's not something like hard science that you have a clear and correct answer. You're going to have some tentative answers with some assumptions, and the better that you have data, that you have intuition, that you talk with, and you have experience of different people, the better will be your estimate. And also, the market potential will be something that can change from scenario to scenario. A new technology, a change in terms of competition, or even economical and political changes can make a huge difference in your estimate of potential. So market potential, thinking about long run, can change a lot of times given the things that happens in the environment. To estimate the demand, it's very important to have a very clear and precise definition of the consumption, of the average consumption. And how can you make these estimates? First of all, it's very easy to find this data using secondary data. Each country in the world will have some estimates of the consumption of different categories of product. And in that case, you basically can go to the official estimates. For instance, in Brazil, we have the family budget research. In Portuguese is Pesquisa de Orçamentos Familiares, POF, P-O-F. And of this research exists basically in all countries in the world. So every country needs to have a research like that. It's the basics for estimating the inflation, but you can use these numbers also to estimate the demand. And if you go to these official estimates, like this family budget research, you can find out some average, the value of the average consumption in these markets. Another way of doing that is to make some kind of research. This is the case of doing a survey using primary data. In that case, you're going to the country that you're planning to start your operation, and then you're going to make a research and ask people what's the amount of how much they are paying for that product, how many times they buy that product, and so on. And finally, you can use similar products for making an approximation. For instance, if you're trying to make one estimate for handcraft, for special beers or crafted beers, you can use the consumption of regular beers and believe that the consumption of crafted beers or special beers will be a percentage of the consumption of the regular beers. And this is one example. You pick up a number that you have, so you have the average consumption of beer, and then you know that some percentage of them will be directed, of this consumption will be directed for crafted or special beers. You can use historical data. For instance, if you are operating in many countries in the world, then you have some better data on the current demand of different products in that market. And you have also other variables of that country like GDP per capita and population size. And then using this data from country and your historical data of demand, you can use that to estimate what will be the average consumption in new countries that you are going to enter. So this is one example of using historic data to make estimates for new countries or new markets that you're entering. And in general, the last option that you have for making this estimate is to make what you call the national estimates of billing divided by the consumption. So basically, if you go to the Minister of Economy or to some specific associations, you're going to have, for instance, the consumption of ice cream in a country. So if you have the total consumption of ice cream in a country and you make a division by the size of population, then you have the average consumption per each people. And then you can use that number to make estimates for specific markets, regions, or even cities. This is one example of the average consumption of beer in the world. So we have many different countries and the average consumption in liters. So as you can see, Austria and Belgium with the highest level, and we have Bulgaria also with very high level, and Brazil with a small level and decreasing in the between 2015 and 2016. And you can use these numbers to estimate a specific market like the craft beer consumption in Brazil. So this is the result of estimate of potential of craft beer consumption in Brazil that we used in that I advised a student, undergraduate student, in their in his essay for in the end of the course. And we created 3 scenarios, and in each of these scenarios we have some assumptions about the percentage of people that will consume it, what will be the percentage of the overall consumption that will be related to that. We created some statistical models and very simple statistical models in each of these scenarios, and based on scenarios of change of these variables, we achieved the forecast for craft beer consumption in Brazil in a pessimistic scenario, in the realistic scenario, and in the optimistic scenario. And you can use that to prepare yourself in each of these different scenarios to have a better strategy to deal with what can happen in these different conditions. The market potential will be affected by changes in the environment and the changes in the strategies and the context of a given sector. And one major factor that will have a huge effect on the market potential is the technological innovations. So new technologies can create new tipping points where you have a change in the growth in the market. And especially when you have the introduction of new products and services, you can have a huge change in this market, in the market potential. In this graph, you have here the beginning of the market, and here the evolution of market until the market reach the saturation level. And the vertical axis represents market demand. So in the beginning of a given market, you have a very slow growth, and after some tipping point, this growth starts increasing very fast. This market starts increasing very fast. So after the tipping point, you have increase, and the market starts growing very fast. And during this period of time, until you reach a point where another tipping point where the growth stop increasing, so you have the sales increasing, the demand increasing year by year, and after some period of time, the level of growth was reduced. So basically, the growth is not so high, and usually there companies will start implementing continuous innovations. So small changes in the products, in the services, but they are not changing everything into the market. And even when you do so, you can keep the growth of this market during some period of time, but the trend is basically to reach a maximum that will be your potential. But also you introduce a disruptive innovation, something that creates something entirely new, and new not only in terms of the product itself, but sometimes related to the production, to the distribution, and this or the way that you deliver the offer to the market. This will be a disruptive innovation that will let more people to enter into the market, or you're going to reduce the costs and making it more affordable for new customers. And these disruptive innovations usually will try to create a new tipping point where you can have a new increase in the market demand until you have another period of reduction of growth over the time. Or you can have introduction of something entirely new that will destroy this existing market and start a new one. For instance, think about personal computers and machines for typing. So in that case, the introduction of personal computers, basically it was a discontinuous innovation, and basically it destroyed the existing market. And the introduction of this discontinuous innovation can create a new product life cycle that can have a huge increase. And with this process of innovation and introduction of small innovations in existing products, or the introduction of entirely new products, can create different product life cycles, and this will change the market potential in a given market. In this video, I intended to present the main challenges when you try to estimate the demand and the potential, and how you can use these numbers to make your planning in international marketing. So, thinking about long-term investments in a given country, market demand, but especially market potential, will be a crucial variable to help you on your decisions. So that's it for this video, and see you in the next. Bye.